All right, sit back, relax. It's time for another Laneway Talks.
Good morning, Rob, and welcome to another episode of Laneway Talks. How are you?
Oh, good, thanks, Vince. Good morning to you too. Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to talk about some drummers. I had this idea the other day listening to some songs and whatever, and I thought, we haven't discussed both being drummers, what we think of drummers, and I think it came up with Kiss. That's right. I was watching a 1976 video of Kiss live in San Francisco. What blew me away was the audio quality. So someone had remastered and obviously had done a damn good job. The vision was a little bit ordinary because it was done filmed on tube cameras. So, you had your flaring and all that. And it was black and white. And what really struck out was Peter Criss. I'd heard a lot of things about Peter Criss over the years that he wasn't a very good drummer. And I always felt, as a real Kiss fan, right from the very first album, I probably got to it in 75 instead of 73, that that he was actually a fantastic drummer. Of course, I liked Kiss. I think the first Rush album I got was Fly By Night, and got initiated there, and of course felt that he was a fantastic drummer, Neil Peart. But you had Deep Purple, you had all these bands. So I go back to Peter Criss, and I still thought he was a pretty good drummer. He was competent. He filled in where he had to. His rhythm was really good. So we might start with Peter Criss, because I've pulled out a few of my vinyls just for the fun of pulling my vinyl out. And I wanted to see what you, being a drum tutor and teacher, what you thought and what you think of Peter Criss as a drummer.
Okay. There was a few things when we spoke about this last night. I just wanted to clarify at the start for people that are listening. It's a subjective subject. Yeah. It's viewed through our own life experiences, I think, because it's a big topic when discussing drummers. And we kind of just have a few little ideas of what we're doing. The genre we're talking about obviously is rock and roll.
Yep, more so than any, yeah.
The era is, we're probably talking 70s.
Well, I'm going to bring up Ringo Starr later, so we're going to go to the 60s. But,
60s, 60s, 70s. Yeah, but I just wanted to clarify that just so we have some sort of guidelines to what we're talking about, and not just mindless yobs banging on about our favourite drummers. We actually know what we're talking about. The country we're talking about.
You do. I don't know what I'm talking about, but you do. I'm a hack.
Self-proclaimed.
Okay, give me your thoughts on Peter Criss.
I've always thought he was a marvellous drummer. When people bag him, I kind of want to know what band they played in, because you've got to look at the band that he's in and the length of the career and how hard they worked just to get to the video that you saw was one of the early ones, wasn't it? 1976, I think.
And what was interesting was the drum kit itself. One thing, exactly. No Kiss on the front skin, and the kit, he was, I think you said it, beating the hell out of that drum kit, and the kit was shaking all over the place. So it wasn't even, at that stage, it was hotter than hell. So they obviously didn't even have, I think, the crew to make sure that kit was really solid and down. And, it was kind of it was really interesting to watch from a drummer's perspective, because I thought not only is he beating the hell out of them, they're moving all over the place.
Yeah, I think at the end of that, the drum riser goes up, so the riser that he's on wobbles because it's on hydraulics.
I don't know. I didn't see that at the end, that it went up.
Right at the end, I think it was in Firehouse is the last song they do.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, the kit actually, when they're doing all the hits, which are just single hits, and they've got the sustain and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
His riser is going up.
Right.
And that's
there's the issue.
You can see it wobbling. So I think that's what it is, because it's on hydraulics and it's not very stable. 70s.
Well, it would have been cheap too, because they're only starting out. They weren't big yet.
Yeah, but Kiss were innovators with that. How many bands were using a drum riser that went up?
Well, and Look, I'm not talking about guitarists, right? But I just had to bring it up. Is Ace Frehley in that show? Oh,
Yeah.
my God, unbelievable, But anyway, back to drumming, okay? So Peter Criss, he does that drum solo in 100,000 Years.
He does, yeah.
And there's no Neil Peart here. There's no Ian Pace. There's no Virgil Donati. But what really intrigued me and kept me glued was his timing, just doing the 2-2-4-4, right? And he's just sitting there doing it, and the timing was just impeccable.
Yeah, the thing is with Peter Criss, because he was such an advocate of Gene Krupa, and Krupa's philosophy was whenever you're playing a drum solo, always keep them dancing. Because if you lose them, if you lose the crowd, what's the point? Display of technical virtuosity can leave a lot of people cold, so you lose your audience. And that's what I loved about Peter Criss, especially in 100,000 Years. He keeps that triplet feel going all the way through it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've pinched that when I was in the modes. We used to do a drum solo every night.
Yeah.
And I played essentially that structure. Combined it with the Ian Pace, the John Bonham and the Neil Peart bits that I pinched as well, and threw them all into something that I could do. But yeah, that whole thing of keeping it going and flowing and playing to the song that you came out of, Peter Criss did that beautifully well. He was technically very competent. He had wonderful hands.
Yeah.
We were listening to Love Gun yesterday in the shop, funnily enough, talking about this, because we were talking about that video that was up on YouTube. And his playing on Love Gun is really right up there. Technically, I think he's given a bit more license because they might have restricted him a little bit. But yeah, you can tell he's quite a competent drummer.
Was that his last album?
I think so, yeah. Then he got replaced by Anton Fig, I think, which is the next album after that.
But that was only for the one album, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and so
then you've got Eric Carr, who was... I saw him here when they toured in the 1980, I think.
Yeah, 1980.
And that was next level.
Right.
Because he had the huge double bass drum Ludwig and massive solo, but it still didn't have the Peter Criss.
I'm with you. I don't care what drummers came after, and they're all good. All right? Let's just shake on that. They're all good. But he had his own style, and I liked it, and that was that.
Yeah, but they're employed to do a job. Peter Criss was there and grew with the band. And they were mates, and that was their band. Two completely different approaches. You've got someone that's a high-paid, high-level drummer, a session player that's just come in and done a job. They're not the original members of the band, so it's going to take it in a different direction. And, of course, they're going to be fantastic because they wouldn't be paying them all the bucks or touring with them if they couldn't play.
So tell me, would you put Peter Criss up in the style of John Bonham and Ian Pace in the style of Neil Peart? I know Ian Pace, he probably wasn't as quick as Neil Peart, but he was up there with him. And
I think
go on.
When you're talking about quick, you're talking about speed around the kit and single stroke rolls. And the thing with Ian Pace and John Bonham, just two of the British drummers, they're also influenced heavily by the Krupa and Rich jazz in the 40s and 50s. And they had that technical style, but they took it into blues and made it heavy blues, right? But those two guys were well before Peter Criss. So there's a bit of a timeline difference. You're talking late 60s, early 70s. Peter Criss is early 70s, mid 70s. Yeah,
you're saying in development, but I'm saying in general. Who would you class together? Ian Pace with Neil Peart and Peter Criss with John Bonham?
Not really.
Right.
I wouldn't do it that way. You've got Bill Ward in there as well. I think Bill Ward is another one that you have to mention in that group of drummers. But Peter Criss was American. It was a completely different approach. When you listen to Kiss, that's a whole new version of rock and roll.
Yeah.
There wasn't another band like that. And Rush toured with Kiss for the first couple of years. And I know Peter Criss and Neil Peart were, good friends, and they talk a lot. And you can hear in Neil's solo Peter Criss elements, the snare drum work, things like that. If you don't really know what you're listening to, you might miss it, but I can hear it. I can hear those influences that Neil would have taken from what he was hearing from Peter. But Neil had the technical ability to take it to a level where I love thinking about Neil as he's the drummer that plays everything that you imagine in your mind that you could play if you had the ability to do it. Neil could actually do that.
Well, I want to put a spanner in the works there for you and say, well, yeah, you might say that, but I would say, well, what you've got is Peter Criss, who by that late 70s had become a drunk and drug addict and therefore was struggling, and that's obviously why he was thrown out of the band eventually. But I don't know that was the case with Neil Peart, was it?
What do you mean?
In the sense of, did he become a alcoholic and heavy drug user? Because that will affect how you develop and where you want to go. Because
I think that Neil says about that, and he says about the different personalities between Ace Frehley and Peter Criss, who are very, very, he called them like a soft personalities.
Yeah.
And you've got Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, who are very driven and business-like personalities, and they can endure a lot of things, and emotionally, whether they were stronger, more shut down, whichever technique they use to get through the stress of the business. When you've got people that are really sensitive, like the Ace Frehleys and the Peter Crisses, they just had to have a release because they couldn't deal with the amount of stress that they were under. And Neil talks about that. And whereas with Rush, those three guys are very, very strong in their own minds and have a fantastic sense of self, and I think that kept them. Well,
the guitarist was a drunk. There's no doubt about that.
In
Rush.
Cheers.
In Rush.
Oh, Alex. Oh.
Yeah. He even said that. He went into rehab a few times.
But they all use substances.
Yeah.
But I don't deny that they don't.
It's the level that you go to, though. So I've been doing this a long time, as you have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but people have an endurance. Some people can maintain it.
Yep.
Some people can't.
Yeah. It's where you go to when you clean yourself up and do whatever. And I think you're right in saying the weak personalities get enticed by the evil side, which is the drug, whether it be alcohol or substance.
I don't know whether they're weak. I don't know whether they're weak personalities. They're just softer personalities. It's just more susceptible to outside forces.
Yeah, you say it as softer, I'll say it as weaker personalities because they're enticed and they can't resist it. Now, one of the things we've spoken about for years in that regard is that can you deal, and this revolves around the music industry on the business side and on the music side, can you deal with the downtimes? So if you're doing shows, there's all the hype and the people and everything that goes with it, and can you endure the times when you're off the road or in business when you're not doing much, so there's no new album out and yada yada. And there is a parallel there, and it's the ones that can handle it and the ones that get bored in between and then need a substance to continue on. Now, that's my opinion, and that's what I've seen over the years, and they find it very difficult to fill in the black holes where there's nothing happening. So we've got to stay on that high. Anyway, I want to bring up, that's only my opinion anyway, I want to bring up in the 70s too, and I'm going to really hit you with a lefty here, okay? So I'm going to hit you with Phil Collins. And I'm not a Phil Collins lover, but I love Phil Collins, and I have all the vinyl where he did Brand X.
Yep.
And if you listen to that, it's a soft jazz rock style of music, and he's to me is sensational in that. And so I'm not sure whether you've listened to Brand X before. They are up
I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I listen to that and I think, right, now we go to a different style of drummer again. What are your thoughts there with Phil Collins?
From Genesis is obviously the go-to with Phil, and then his phenomenal catalogue of solo work. He's very...
I was never a fan of any of it, but Brand X, different thing altogether.
Yeah, I mean, it's same with Bruford for me.
Oh, yeah.
Bruford's with Yes and all of that, those progressive drummers. I mean, I'd throw Barrymore Barlow in there from Jethro Tull and those bands that took themselves a little bit more seriously, but they also diversified into jazz styles, which is, like Bruford and Phil Collins. And
I mean, Ginger Baker was around there. Did you like Ginger Baker? Well, yeah, I know you're now thinking about it. I could tell you straight up, I didn't think he was that good. I didn't like his style whatsoever.
There was not but Cream were a super band, but there wasn't. Ginger could play, technical ability, but
Well, you got to put it across everything he's done. So you go Baker Gervert's Army, and whatever, and who else he's played with. But he never shone out for me. I'm not suggesting he's not a good drummer. I'm just suggesting I didn't think he was in there with the greats, but he's considered one of the greats.
yeah, I mean, I played quite a few Cream songs, and I like his notes, and I like what he does. But they weren't a band that really tickled me like like a Jethro Tull or a Led Zeppelin or a Black Sabbath or Hendrix. I mean, Mitch Mitchell, I love his playing. And I find it really comfortable to play that Hendrix stuff. I just love where Mitch's head was at. And he's another jazz influence guy. They have a really good sense of phrasing and musicality, which appeals to me.
Well, I'm putting aside. We will come to Australian drummers, and I think the thing we need to put this out there is that we're going to exclude Neil Peart and Virgil Donati. All right, we've got to exclude them because they're on the top level of everybody for me. So now we're going to go to UFO.
Okay.
Andy Parker. What do you think?
Wasn't really a fan of UFO. Once again, that style is a little bit too regimented for me, I think.
Too regimented, too more blues and rhythm and blues, and in a sense with a rock edge.
I mean, we used to do Doctor Doctor
Yeah.
in the Soldiers, It's good, but it just sounded like everybody else.
And the funny thing about UFO, I was a big fan, but not about all their stuff, but I was a big fan. And their 1980 double live album, to me, the recording and the playing on that has got to be one of the best live albums ever released, whether you're a UFO fan or not. Now, if you haven't had a good listen to it, have a good listen to it. And listen to the production. A bit hard, I suppose, when it's MP3s, but I've got it on vinyl. And it just, they're playing everything. It's just one of those quintessential, it's perfect. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely perfect. We got UFO Andy Parker. So I was a big fan of Andy Parker. I thought really, really good and could put in some great performances across sometimes ordinary tracks. And UFO did, I don't disagree with you, some of their stuff was ordinary. And especially the really early albums. Now, Fawcett was just a work of art. But like I think it might be their first and their second album. I just didn't like them. They're not that good. And there's some later albums that are just not that good. Now, I'm going to keep it British this stage. So we're going to Free and Simon Kirke.
Yeah,
and Bad
love
Company. So
awesome.
For me, Simon Kirke was an innovator. So there's a video out of Free live at some university back in 1971 or something like that. It's a fantastic quality, shows his drumming, and this guy is not an extraordinary drummer, but I say he's an innovator.
Yeah, but he's got that magic something.
Well, tell me about it. What is it? Because I say he's innovative, but he's not a fantastic drummer in that sense.
Well, you can't really define it in a technical sense. It's an ethereal thing that, Free and Bad Company have. They've just got that sound that moves you, and trying to define that with words is very difficult at times, I find.
Do you think he invented that 2-2 on the snare, right? 2-2 and then the bass drum, 2 bass drum, 2 bass drum, or 1, sorry, I'll call it 1. That hit that he does?
Yeah, it could be right.
We always felt that he was the guy that developed that. He was the one.
I love that. I've stolen that many times. So.
Yeah, and I always felt he was the one that did it. It comes to mind every time you do it. If you do it yourself, I think Simon Kirke, right? And he used to be impeccable at doing it. Impeccable.
Yeah, Ringo kind of has that element as well.
What, really? Because, we'll bring him up now because I've got him here. I have never, ever felt that Ringo Starr was in any level of drumming. Isn't that interesting? I just don't I don't know, every time I watch him play, forget the 60s, because the 60s we didn't have the clarity. You couldn't power in on the drummer, and the drummer was never expected to do too much either. It was very rare. In the 70s, that all changed. And anything I've watched of him, the guy just hits the drums, that's it. Doesn't hit him hard.
I mean, my sisters listened to the Beatles, and the Beatles were always on in our house, but I was a big fan of the last album.
Which one was that? Let It Be?
Well, from Let It Be, and then there was a compilation album called Hey Jude. I just thrashed those two albums because I loved what Ringo played on all of them, because it was heavier. I think they were a little bit more self-indulgent. I mean, I love the White Album as well. That's pretty trippy. There's lots of interesting stuff on that. But when I go through the back catalogue, Ringo's just perfect for that band.
I'm not going to deny that and I just didn't. He never shone out for me. And everybody goes Ringo Starr. So what?
But he sat there. You've probably seen the movie, the Let It Be movie, and he just sat there. He was always ready to go. Never whinged about anything. Always just loved being there. I think that. They're very important.
Well, really, do you think that's important? Well, I thought we were just talking about drumming style, but
that's a part of it, to have the patience and then to be able to go into it and not race and slow down, speed up.
That's true. That's true. Actually,
it always felt great. That ethereal thing that I'm talking about. You can't define that in words. It's just this magical thing that exists.
Was he ever associated with a drum kit specifically? Ringo, Ludwig, was it?
He put Ludwig on the map. They were making they were selling some phenomenal amount. I don't know, it was 60,000 kits a month or something.
Really?
During the height of the Beatles.
Oh, really? Okay, so
they put Ludwig drums on the map.
Wow, I didn't know that.
They gave him a gold snare drum because of it.
Well, okay, so we've gotten to Ringo. We're going to just move over to Australia. And my first initiation with, a drummer that I really admired was Jimmy Ikanumo from Buffalo.
I know Jimmy. Yeah.
Do you? So
yeah, we live over here now.
Oh, does he live in Adelaide? Does he?
Yeah, he's a character.
So
lovely.
Well, and the thing is, did he ever play with anybody else after Buffalo?
That's a good question.
I don't think he did. I'd never ever seen his name again on any recordings or anything. But put that aside.
I love Buffalo. I saw them.
Well, terrific. Yeah, me too. Love them.
They opened for Rainbow at Festival Theatre, and they blew my mind. And that was Mother's Choice, and everyone said, "Oh, that's not one of their best albums." But,
no, Mother's Choice. Yeah, that's got Carl on guitar. Anyway, yeah. I was trying to get him to come across to Laneway, and he hasn't come across because the album after, which is the last album, that's got Chris Turner playing on it. Anyway, Mother's Choice, it wasn't a bad album, that one, really. The last album's probably the only one I don't like that much. But go back to, your first four or whatever, but then Jimmy's there through the whole lot. Now, what did you think of that drumming? What about the style? And he used to play too for a while there. Didn't you love it, the see-through drum kit?
Yeah, he did. The Vista Light.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, fantastic. What did you think of his style?
I loved it. I love Buffalo. They were a sensational Australian early hard rock band.
But more specifically on Jimmy, what comes to mind when you think Jimmy and him playing with Buffalo? His style.
Well, it was powerful.
Yeah.
He had, his time was always good.
That's what comes to mind for me. Timing.
Yeah.
Not fast. Really. Never fast. I've never seen him play fast, and I've seen him play a few times.
But there's a sit that he has with the band. That's what an important element to any of it.
I think as a riff band, they had a lot of that riffy going on, that Black Sabbath type riff thing. And
yeah, they were doing it,
Yeah, and he would just sit in the groove, and that was that. He was the rhythm section MD in a sense, just sat there.
But the early live stuff I've seen, when he goes and plays fills, and he's got great hands.
Yeah, well, that's one there. So there's Jimmy from Buffalo. Then I move to John Annis. Now, so we moved to John Annis, who could have been.
KB.
He could have been. So, it all went wrong in the end for John.
Yeah, but he was, though.
Definitely. So, if we look at Kevin Borich Express and then the big combo, and he did quite a few things after that too. This guy, to me, should have been playing around the world.
Yeah, it's circumstance, coming back to Neil Peart, how eloquent he is. Just because you're the best drummer in your particular area doesn't mean that you're going to have success, because there's so many other factors that come into that.
Well, don't you think that John had reached the pinnacle of his success in this country?
But it's not a failure. It's not a failure of talent. It's a failure in character. It's a flaw in the character.
No, that's right. That's why I say I think he should have been playing all around the world. But unfortunately...
I was lucky enough to see him up close a few times, because the gig we used to do in the Linden Tree in St Kilda.
Saw him play many times.
Yeah, John used to come up and sit in with the band I was playing with, which was with Richie Moore and Stu Storm. It was just a 3-4 piece thing that we used to do. I think we'd start at 1 and finish at 5.
Yeah.
So imagine the crowd turning up, which is great. But John used to get up and play, and I just loved sitting there watching him play, because he was just brilliant.
He was, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I have seen him play probably in the last 8 years, and he was just as good.
Yeah, I think going downtown is a really good marker if you want to listen to just strength, endurance, great time, and musicality. What he's doing in that, holding that train beat down in that song, and then when he goes into the riff, it's so clean, it doesn't shift, and then he goes back into the groove again and sort of brings it down.
That was his style, really. Exactly what you just said there. That was his style. So he could and remember, he always seemed to play a bloody concert kit, and he could go all around those drums and bang straight back into beautiful timing and just sitting in the backbeat, and then bang off he'd go again. Unbelievable, and made it look so effortless. Yeah.
Celebration's one of my favourite vinyl.
Absolutely.
Still have that great album.
Fantastic, and KB still playing to this day, and has had large success with his latest album, where I think he did a complete covers album. Just sensational. He just had that style, and I used to love the drum kits he had. They were just fantastic. Yeah. But not so to be anymore. Not really prevalent in doing anything really. So they're my kind of the ones I came up with this morning.
Okay.
You got any you want to throw in there?
Well, on Australian drummers, I've got to say Freddie Strauss.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because I looked at those. I have the box set of Skyhooks, because we put it out at Mushroom, and I was going to pull it out, and then I thought, no, I'll remember that, and you've brought it up. Now, he, as much as he was never... Well, from my perspective and the people I knocked around with, nobody ever talked about Freddie as a great drummer, and I used to think he was a great drummer. Not because he wasn't. Yeah, you said it, didn't you? Underrated. He was good, wasn't he?
Well, I saw Skyhooks a lot.
Yeah, me too.
And I just sat with my jaw on the ground, and I'd go home and I'd try and play those songs, and I couldn't do what he was doing.
Yeah.
No, I was 13, 14, 15. And their arrangements, McCainch and Brett Simons, Bongo. Shell took it to another level as well. But Freddie was just always there, and just Shop City, so clean, so relaxed, having a great time, funny as a fit. That band was just everything.
Absolutely. And what their biggest downfall, they should have been in America. I think they only did the one tour. And
but America didn't work for them. They hated it.
Well, hold on. You can't work now. Let's get a bit serious about this. In that, you cannot break America on one tour. And Jimmy Barnes we sent over, and we signed him to Geffen, and we sent him over, and that was a complete disaster too.
But he hated the Yanks. I mean, the same thing that Midnight Oil and Skyhawks did. They all hated the Yanks because of their attitude.
Well, yeah. Now, whether it's attitude or whatever, I still say Skyhawks should have, and I go back to what you were just saying, their arrangements were unbelievable.
They were.
The end product of each song, unbelievable. And they should have been a world-renowned band. I wasn't going to say a world class. They were a world class, but a world-renowned band. But by the time they'd gotten to America, they'd all had partners started coming in, families, and all the things that happen. And
Distractions.
but what they should have done is they should have lived over there for a couple of years. To me, they would have cracked it. Now, Jimmy was the same. When he went over, he was so big here, the temptation to come back here, because over there they'd gone, whatever, he hardly even got a clap. He needed to do the years over there. But once you have that success here, you get enticed by that and you come back. But remember, what are we talking about here? Well, today, 25, 27 million. Back then, bloody 12 million or whatever.
Yeah.
And, there wasn't the market was never going to sustain you on a huge level. And it did with Jimmy and kind of with Skyhooks, kind of. And I used to see, I know all the money's involved. So, and I got to be careful. We'll never discuss it ever, but I do laugh because I've had this people who talk to me and they tell me about what the situation was or what happened at the time. I'm not referring just to them, on a lot of issues where I was actually there, I was part of it, I know exactly the detail, I did contracts, and they tell me, and it's completely the other side, right? They don't even know what it's talking about. It's that fifth-hand news, and I get this a lot, and it's a little bit frustrating at times. I'm not kidding. I have good friends who even tell me stories about what happened. I'm sitting there going, but I signed that band, I was the one that got them in, and I know exactly what happened, and they're telling me a different story. It's incredible.
But people don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, do they?
No, yeah. I have so much of it, and anyway, it is what it is, but going back to those bands. So we drifted off. So we started with drummers, right? And we've just talked about a few drummers. Now, of course, there's millions of drummers, and there's some fantastic ones who never even get mentioned anywhere. But I just wanted to bring up a few on styles and, how they've survived and, what they did and whatever. So that was my little rant for today.
Well, in Australian drummers, you've got to say Phil Rudd.
Yes, we discussed him a couple of shows ago where you discussed his style. And there is no doubt that guy from Buster Brown onwards was a talent. Now, he was no brilliant drummer in the sense that he stood out like Neil Peart. But God, he was good, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest drummers of our time. And I mean, technically he's not Australian, but he's from New Zealand, isn't he?
He's New Zealander, and he lives over there. Huge
I mean,
issues.
There's another one, like Paul Hester, Rob Hurst.
Mm.
You can't really have conversations without talking about those guys as well.
Well, we put up a video of Horsehead on our Facebook page.
Craig.
And Craig War. Now, you watch him play.
Great drummer.
Yeah, great.
Uncanny X-Men, man. I used to see them all the time as well. We played with them a lot.
Yeah.
And I love Craig's playing.
Absolutely. And I when you look at him playing in Horsehead, the power is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But he was a chunky guy, so he could really put some weight behind those sticks. And
but that's what I like about the X-Men, like you can't underestimate that band either. They were game changers.
Yeah, they were. What a stage show. They
were kind of like a continuation of the Skyhooks Melbourne ethos. That's what I thought about. The cheeky, and Mannix was hilarious, and the costume changes. But the band was elite. They were such fantastic players, very talented, not overstated. They just did the job well. And Craig held that really well. I love Horsehead as well because Scotty Kingman. I used to work with Scotty at Brash's.
Oh yeah,
great guitar player, cool guy. His brother Brett Kingman, another legendary guitar player.
Yeah, Scotty doesn't do any real lead work in Horsehead, does he?
They did the sit and the chunk and it's like a Malcolm Young, that whole Australian ethos of that formula that works for Aussie hard rock.
I mean, I knew a lot about Uncanny X-Men because I just arrived at Mushroom, I don't know, 84, something like that. And their first album had taken off and was sensational and had really rocked the local scene. and then they had enormous issues. That was the end of that. So I know a lot about the background there and what happened.
Yeah.
And, we all used to see each other quite a lot. Anybody else there that, what about people like John Corniola and Frank Corniola? What about Frank?
Frank's unbelievable.
Is he?
It's sad, no, it's not sad, but Frank made a decision to concentrate on his business.
Yes.
But I saw Frank play quite a few times.
Pretty good decision.
Yeah, well, anything Frank Corniola's going to do is going to be next level anyway, and 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, Frank's an astonishing player.
Is he? I've never seen him play ever.
Well, him and Virgil, for me, they were the two guys in town in Melbourne.
Yeah.
A lot of people wouldn't realise that Frank and Virgil, Virgil went on to do what he did, but Frank technically, and I think his level of intelligence as well is up there, because there's a thing for those guys at that level that you have to kind of, I've said it before, they get music on a whole other level than us mere mortals, and it comes across in their playing, and there's no way to really explain what that is. It's just they have a level of intelligence that isn't overly challenged by the level of technical prowess that they have. And Frank's that level. John's the same. He's so humble and such a lovely guy,
Yeah, I do know John. I don't know Frank.
Yeah, I mean, John was at the Soldiers record launch at the Underground, and he was so supportive of me at that time. I'd never forget, because those guys are really, really high level. I respect that, but to sort of come into our world, be there. And, John was at the Soldiers gig that we did a couple of years back.
Yeah. So, look, as I said, I've never seen Frank play, and so I can't kind of comment. All I know is everybody says this guy's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Next level.
Yeah, gotcha.
He speaks the language.
All right, so that's about it for today.
Yeah, beautiful.
Good talking to you, Rob, and we'll talk next week. And Laneway Red is on the way. We'll be able to give a few people access, and then hopefully on the 15th we're launching. Okay?
That's great news.
Soft launch, though. Soft launch. There won't be any marketing or anything at this stage.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
All right, mate. See you later.
Cheers, Vince. Thanks.
Bye.
And there it is, another Laneway Talks.